I am a practitioner of the Chanoyu, known in English as the tea ceremony. The tea ceremony is not a stage show. It continues to hold significance today, both within Japan and beyond, as a means to heal people or connect individuals. For practitioners of the tea ceremony to carry on their work throughout the ages, anywhere in the world, a stable supply of matcha is absolutely essential. Currently, a matcha latte boom is sweeping the globe, leading to massive trade in Japanese matcha. Prices have skyrocketed and shortages are occurring. In Japan, matcha has traditionally existed for the tea ceremony. In the tea ceremony, matcha is consumed simply mixed with hot water. Over many years, tea cultivation methods and varieties have been refined specifically for this method of preparation to ensure it tastes delicious without adding sugar or milk. I want to consider whether this matcha, suited for the tea ceremony, is also suitable for matcha lattes. 1. About matcha. Tea plants are evergreen trees that naturally grow to about 7 meters tall. However, for mass production prioritizing work efficiency, tea plants are densely planted and kept low through pruning. Additionally, for about 2 weeks during the new shoot growth period, nearly 100% shading is applied using covers to reduce bitterness and enhance umami flavor. This cultivation method is not healthy for the tea plant and weakens its vigor. Next, let's look at the process from harvesting the new shoots to the sale of matcha. The first flush tea picked in spring is used for tea ceremonies. The second flush and subsequent flush are pruned to improve the quality of the following year's first flush. Instead of discarding these, they are utilized for confectionery and beverages. Therefore, in Japan, even if it's the same powdered tea leaf, matcha specifically refers to tea for ceremonies, while powdered green tea refers to the confectionery grade. None of the matcha growers cultivate tea leaves specifically for matcha lattes. Their purpose is to grow tea leaves for the tea ceremony. Until the 2024 season, if the price of first flush tea was 10, second flush tea was about 5, and autumn flush tea was about 2. However, in the 2025 season, the price of first flush tea became 20, second flush tea became 10, and autumn flush tea became 10, leading to increased distribution of second flush and autumn flush teas. Now the picked new shoots are immediately steamed. This stops the activity of enzymes within the tea leaves to preserve their beautiful green color. This steaming process is used for most Japanese green teas. Chinese green teas and some Japanese green teas are pan-fired instead. The tea leaves, cooled and dried after steaming, are called aracha. Growers sell this to manufacturers. Manufacturers process aracha into a state called tencha, where the leaves are finely crushed. Storing tencha at low temperatures between -25 to 5 degrees Celsius allows it to maintain its quality for about 3 years. Then, upon receiving an order, the manufacturer grinds the tencha into a fine powder to make matcha. The flavor of a product like Matcha A is consistently maintained. To achieve this, the types and proportions of tencha blended vary each time, and second flush tea may also be mixed in. In the past, matcha was ground using stone mills. Nowadays, technology has advanced and machine grinding has become more common. For information on grinding, you can refer to coffee grinders. Machine grinding produces uniformly fine particles quickly at low temperatures. Maintenance is relatively easy. Stone mill grinding requires regular sharpening to maintain consistent particle size. Few artisans perform this sharpening, and mastering the skill takes many years. The belief that stone mill grinding enhances flavor stems from the fact that grinding continuously from morning until evening warms the millstones through friction heat. This heat imparts a roasted-like flavor and aroma to the matcha. The graph shows the results of a blind tasting by 11 people comparing the taste of machine-ground and stone-ground matcha. While the taste differs depending on the grinding method, there was no difference in the evaluation of deliciousness. Furthermore, the roasted-like flavor and aroma disappear as the storage period lengthens. Matcha sales methods include manufacturers completing the product before entrusting it for sale, retailers commissioning manufacturers to produce finished goods as private label items, or retailers purchasing matcha, repackaging it in smaller portions at their own stores and selling it with their own labels. Health benefits of matcha. Matcha's taste is primarily characterized by bitterness and astringency, which originate from catechins, vitamin C, and caffeine. Furthermore, since matcha is made by grinding tea leaves into powder, it also contains dietary fiber. Thus, drinking matcha offers numerous potential benefits. Now, Japan currently faces significant population decline and westernized eating habits. Consequently, the number of matcha growers and the area of tea fields continue to decrease. If growers can profit by exporting matcha overseas, capitalizing on the recent matcha latte boom, they will likely continue cultivation, potentially attracting younger generations to farming. However, exporting matcha outside Japan presents several problems. First, regarding pesticide residue regulations. Countries set maximum residue limits for pesticides in each food product to protect the health of their citizens and maintain fair trade. The maximum residue limits permitted by the Japanese government for pesticides in tea leaves, including matcha, are significantly higher than those of other countries. Consequently, very few nations accept Japanese matcha for export. Recognizing this situation, Japan's Ministry of Agriculture, Forestry, and Fisheries developed pesticide application methods that do not exceed the MRLs of its primary export destinations, the US, the EU, and Taiwan. This was achieved by using pesticides with short residual effects and by limiting the timing of spraying. However, very few growers adopt this pesticide application method. This is because manufacturers and retailers do not purchase usucha cultivated in this method. Theanine is an amino acid and the primary component of umami flavor. This figure shows that the higher the umami content in matcha, the higher its price. In other words, manufacturers and retailers consider umami to be the most crucial factor in matcha. They also dislike leaves damaged by pests and diseases, as this alters the flavor and reduces yield. Therefore, to increase umami, growers use large amounts of nitrogen fertilizer, the raw material for amino acid synthesis. However, this further weakens already unhealthy trees and soil, making them more susceptible to pest and disease outbreaks. To prevent this, pesticides are also sprayed preventively. Thus, the uji method cultivation method, the standard in matcha farming, involves using large quantities of nitrogen fertilizer and pesticides for the sake of umami. Matcha cultivation methods can be broadly categorized into 4 types. The standard method, low residue pesticide cultivation, developed by the Ministry of Agriculture, Forestry, and Fisheries, organic cultivation, and pesticide-free cultivation. Low residue pesticide cultivation is primarily adopted in Shizuoka Prefecture, while organic cultivation is mainly practiced in Kagoshima Prefecture. Outside these regions, the uji method cultivation is employed. In other words, among Japanese matcha, approximately 10% is low pesticide residue matcha, about 30% is organic matcha, and over 50% is uji method, meaning high pesticide residue matcha. To determine whether cultivation methods affect taste evaluations, that is, whether only Uji method matcha is truly delicious. As claimed by manufacturers and sellers reluctant to relinquish brand-based vested interests and profit ties, I conducted a blind tasting of Uji-style matcha, low pesticide residue matcha, and organic matcha prepared as usucha. Participants included 2,433 travelers visiting Japan from overseas who expressed interest in matcha, and 79 Japanese individuals interested in matcha, totaling 322 participants. As a result, in the 7-point taste evaluation, both the mean and median scores were 5 or higher. Low residue pesticide matcha and organic matcha received high ratings similar to Uji method matcha. Furthermore, it was bitterness, not umami, that influenced the ratings. Example, as shown in Figure A, 90% of those who gave low ratings mentioned bitterness, while the proportion mentioning bitterness decreased among high-rating individuals. This indicates acceptance of matcha's bitterness. Furthermore, when high-rating individuals did mention bitterness, positive adjectives like pleasant bitterness increased. This situation is similar to whether one says, "I dislike it because it's bitter," about coffee or beer. Next, Uji method matcha should be ineligible for export due to excessive pesticide residues. However, in reality, it is exported directly from matcha companies in Uji City to overseas distributors, who then sell it to consumers outside Japan. Therefore, we measured pesticide residue levels in various matcha products. The results showed that around 20 types of pesticides were detected in Uji method matcha, sometimes in large quantities, making it eligible for export to almost no countries. Low residue matcha showed trace amounts of 0 to 3 pesticides. No pesticides were detected in organic matcha. The right side of the graph shows the maximum residue limits set by each country. Japan generally has higher limits, while the EU, for example, has lower ones. While the US permits higher levels of some pesticides than Japan, many pesticides detected in US imports are banned. Additionally, pesticides colored blue are neonicotinoids, considered one cause of colony collapse disorder. In 2025, the EU banned outdoor use of neonicotinoids. Moreover, most neonicotinoid pesticides were synthesized by Japanese chemical companies, which were industrial conglomerates. Based on the above, it has been confirmed that Uji method matcha contains high levels of residual pesticides and is being illegally exported outside Japan. And why do countries other than Japan permit imports of Uji method matcha containing pesticides exceeding the maximum residue limits? Typically, food transported to airports or ports undergoes residual pesticide testing at quarantine stations, but this is not performed on all shipments. Naturally, priority is given to testing staple foods like grains, vegetables, and fruits, which are imported in large quantities measured in tons. As a result, 30 grams can of matcha, specialty souvenir items, non-essential groceries are not subject to inspection. Furthermore, testing costs between 30,000 yen to 50,000 yen per sample and takes approximately 1 week to produce results. This measurement uses mass spectrometers, which cost over 10 million yen and require controlled temperature and humidity in the measurement room, as well as specialized technical skills for the analysis. I was once told by the management of a certain Uji matcha company, illegal exports have never been detected before, and they never will be detected in the future. So please feel free to export our matcha. Because the quarantine stations in the destination countries are dysfunctional, and because virtually no one is aware of the pesticide residue regulations, matcha with high pesticide residues is being exported illegally and openly. People often say matcha tastes delicious in Japan, but this isn't due to grade differences. It's caused by poor storage conditions. In Japan, matcha has a shelf life of 6 months at room temperature. However, when exported, this shelf life can be extended to 1 year at room temperature. This is permitted by the government to promote exports. While matcha can be stored at room temperature, to preserve its flavor, aroma, and color, it must be protected from air, UV light, and heat. Specifically, expel as much air as possible using an aluminum pouch. Seal it tightly, store it in the dark, and freeze it. This way, unopened, it can maintain quality for over a year. However, storing at room temperature yields a higher profit margin than purchasing freezers and paying daily electricity costs, so most sellers store it at room temperature long term. And you are unaware of this. Therefore, no matter how expensive the matcha is, storing it at room temperature for an extended period will quickly diminish its deliciousness. There is a misconception that using ceremonial-grade matcha from Japan makes matcha lattes taste better. There is no such term as ceremonial grade in Japan. Matcha specifically refers to powdered tea leaves used in the tea ceremony. Its bitterness and astringency have been reduced over time, so it tastes delicious even without adding sugar or milk. This delicate flavor of matcha gets masked by sugar and milk. Powdered tea leaves for matcha lattes must possess a bitterness and strength that pairs well with the sweetness of milk and sugar. Lawson convenience stores began selling matcha lattes starting November 4th. Runs a matcha cafe in the US and says he purchased autumn flush tea. In other words, they're making matcha lattes with autumn flush tea. And it's still delicious. And it doesn't have to be Japanese matcha. In fact, the US imports more green tea from China than from Japan. As described above, the failure of quarantine stations to conduct effective pesticide residue testing. Boasting about matcha other than organic matcha and Shizuoka-produced matcha amounts to boasting about illegal matcha. Sellers and consumers are easily degrading matcha quality. The misconception that using Japanese ceremonial-grade matcha makes matcha lattes taste better. The terms Japanese-produced and ceremonial-grade exerting a placebo effect. All these factors are encouraging the illegal import and export of matcha. Furthermore, manufacturers and sellers conveniently exploit this information for profit. As long as Uji method matcha continues to generate illegal profits overseas, sellers and manufacturers will not permit cultivators to transition from Uji method to low pesticide residue or organic cultivation. This benefits neither the economy nor the environment. While pesticide safety tests are conducted, these results apply only to healthy adults. For individuals with chronic conditions like diabetes or children, health risks may increase. Furthermore, I propose to the Math and Shizuoka Prefecture that establishing a mark clearly identifying it as low-residue pesticide cultivated matcha, similar to how organic cultivation has the organic jazz mark, would differentiate it from Uji method matcha and make it easier for quarantine authorities in export destination countries to identify it. However, this proposal has been ignored. When the MAF receives reports from other governments stating excessive pesticides were detected in Japanese food products, it issues written warnings to the industry. However, since they have designated green tea, including matcha, as a key export product and set export value targets, it is only natural that they would prefer to keep increasing export volumes without exposing violations, even if they are illegal. Reliable matcha manufacturers and sellers will disclose their pesticide residue test results upon your request. By choosing the correct matcha, the entire matcha industry will shift towards low pesticide residue and organic matcha. A stable supply of matcha will then ensure the global preservation of the tea ceremony culture.